My name is Hunter Cardinal. I am the Director of Story at Naheyawin, and I'm also an Oliver resident. I think now more than ever, we as a community need an idea and a value to gather and rally around, something that reflects who we are. And what we're finding is the name and the person and the actions that it's associated with don't reflect what's at the core of this community. This is one of the most densely populated neighborhoods in Edmonton. It's also one of the most diverse neighborhoods in Edmonton, I think. And having a name that reflects that should kind of be our goal. This idea isn't actually new. It's been around for quite a while. Most notably during Canada 150, residents in the Oliver community have brought up several times that this name needs to go and that we should be having a conversation about it. And that, of course, was during Canada's 150, where we as Canadians, not just Oliver residents, were starting to really examine our history and take ownership of that. The reception has been fantastic. There's been a really wonderful conversation that's been started that's important and also very thoughtful and intelligent. A lot of people did not know that this community was actually named after someone. And if they did know that it was named after Frank Oliver, they actually didn't know the full history of what he did. So that's been very interesting. And of course, once they hear about that, it's kind of we jump already to the question of, yeah, of course the name would need to change because those actions don't reflect who we are today. The question then becomes, well, what should we have this name be? What do we want to have this community be named after, and who are we today? We want to have this conversation continue, and then we want to find a name that would reflect who we are as a community. So we're calling on the city to help lead an inclusive consultation process that is Indigenous-led, that involves the communities that Frank Oliver affected, and that also allows us as a community to decide the name that we want to be named after. Afterwards, we're going to ask that the city implement the name that is brought forward through this consultation process. And then lastly, we recognize that societies that have a colonial history like Canada are struggling to reconcile their past. So we think that we need new tools and processes and ways of thinking about naming. And we were very inspired by our Indigenous ancestors' thoughts, ways of being, and ways of thinking about naming. And we wanted to include Indigenous governance principles to help inform a new process and to have that identity as a community. Specifically, we were inspired by Indigenous governance principles that talked about renewal, that talked about making space for people and also places to change. So we thought, instead of creating a one and done process for naming, that we would have a cyclical process where once in a generation, communities would gather, would reflect, would think about who they are, the spirit of their home, and the community also that they want to be, and either through a process of celebrating the name that they have, or perhaps even having a conversation about renaming, we'd have an opportunity to really figure out who we want to be today, who we are today, and also who we want to be in the future.